The monitors beeped steadily in room 414, a quiet rhythm that had become as familiar as breath to Hannah Blake. She sat in the same vinyl chair she'd claimed for nearly a year, her posture relaxed but her spirit tightly coiled. Every evening after her shift, she returned here, to this quiet corner of Sign, Augustine Medical Center in Charleston, South Carolina. Not because she had to, but because she couldn't stay away. The man in the bed, Christopher Langston, wasn't just a patient, not anymore. At first, he was just another name on the ICU board, a former tech executive, critically injured in a highway crash, unresponsive since the fall of last year. When Hannah first read his intake chart, her pulse had stumbled. The name, the age, the timing, and more than that, the connection. Christopher Langston had once been engaged to her older sister, Sarah. Sarah, who died that same week. The doctors said it was a tragic coincidence. 2 separate accidents, 1 life lost, 1 held in limbo. But Hannah had never believed in coincidence. She hadn't told anyone. Not the other nurses, not the attending physician, not even her supervisor. Why she'd requested his case, why she sat beside him night after night, reading aloud books Sarah once loved. Books like The Velveteen Rabbit, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and most recently, To Kill a Mockingbird. Her voice, calm and low, filled the room with something between prayer and memory. Tonight, her copy of The Little Prince sat open on her lap. She had just finished the final chapter. Her fingers traced the edge of the page as she closed the book gently, almost ceremoniously. "That's enough for tonight," she whispered, brushing a lock of hair from Christopher's forehead with quiet tenderness. "You would have liked it. Or maybe you already do." She stood, stretching her back. It was late. Time to turn off the light and go home. But then, something broke the stillness. A sound, a gasp, a shift in the air. Hannah froze. The book fell from her hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. She turned slowly. Christopher's fingers moved. Barely at first, just a twitch, but enough to send her stomach flipping. Then his eyes, closed for nearly 11 months, fluttered open. Not wide, not fully alert, but blinking, searching. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Christopher," she whispered. His eyes met hers. Green, raw, haunted. And then a word, rasped from dry lips, trembling and hoarse. "Sarah?" Hannah stepped backward instinctively, her heart slamming into her ribs. He surged upward with more strength than he should have had, arms wrapping around her tightly, breath hitching in ragged sobs. "You're alive," he gasped, voice cracking as he clutched her. "I saw you fall. I saw the wreck. I thought I lost you. Oh God, Sarah." Hannah couldn't move. His face was buried in her shoulder, and she stood there frozen, overwhelmed by the storm of emotions crashing over her. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to wake up like this, and he definitely wasn't supposed to call her that name. "I'm not," she stammered, voice barely audible. "I'm not Sarah." But he didn't let go. Or maybe he didn't hear her. Or maybe, somewhere deep in his fractured consciousness, he just didn't want to. The door flew open. The heart monitor had spiked. 2 nurses rushed in, their expressions flickering between alarm and relief. "Mr. Langston," one of them said cautiously, "you're awake. That's good. But we need you to lie back down, okay?" Christopher resisted, clinging to Hannah like she was the only thing anchoring him to reality. "Don't take her. She's here. She's real. She's alive." The nurses exchanged looks, then gently, firmly, pried his arms from around her. He collapsed back onto the pillows, still weeping, still whispering her sister's name, like a prayer torn in half. Hannah stumbled backward, pale, shaking. Her knees buckled as she reached for the wall, breath short and sharp in her chest. She didn't hear the nurse asking if she was okay. She didn't feel the hand on her shoulder guiding her toward the hallway. Outside the ICU, she collapsed onto the bench, burying her face in her hands. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. She couldn't stop shaking. He thought she was Sarah. Why did he say her name with such desperation? Why did he look at her like that? A nurse sat beside her quietly, giving space but also presence. After a few minutes, Hannah whispered almost to herself, "He thought I was someone else. The nurse nodded gently. You were the first face he saw after nearly a year in darkness. Sometimes, people reach for what they miss the most. But it wasn't just anyone he saw, it was Sarah. And Sarah was gone. But in that moment, through Christopher's tears, his voice, his embrace, Hannah realized something terrifying and unshakable. Whatever had happened to Sarah before that crash, Christopher hadn't forgotten. And deep inside her own heart, neither had she. The next morning came heavy with silence. Hannah stood outside room 414, her hands wrapped tightly around a styrofoam coffee cup she hadn't touched. Through the glass, she could see Christopher lying still again, his breathing even, his face turned slightly toward the window, bathed in pale South Carolina light. A soft sedation had been administered overnight to calm his nervous system. The attending had said it was routine, that post-coma confusion was common, even expected. But what Christopher had said, what he remembered, wasn't something they could dismiss with a prescription. Sarah. That one name had torn open a vault in Hannah's chest, and it wasn't just the grief of hearing it. It was the way he'd said it, the way he had clung to her like the world depended on her being real, like he'd seen something, remembered something, that mattered more than just a mistake. She hadn't spoken Sarah's name aloud in months. Her sister had died on a rainy Tuesday evening last fall, November 2nd, 9:18 p.m. A semi-truck had slid through an intersection and hit her sedan full force on the passenger side. The coroner's report said she died instantly. The police called it a weather-related tragedy, a freak accident. Nothing anyone could have done, but Hannah had never believed that. Sarah Blake was cautious, intuitive. She didn't take unnecessary risks, never sped in the rain, and always wore her seatbelt. The accident felt wrong, not just sudden, but off, like something had been set in motion before the impact, like someone else had been involved. And then there was the voicemail. 3 days before the crash, Hannah had missed a call from Sarah. The message that came through was faint, full of static, as if it had been left in a rush or in fear. "Han, if anything happens to me, promise me you'll find Chris. He needs to know the truth." Then silence. The message cut off before she could explain what the truth meant. Hannah had replayed it dozens of times, memorized the tremble in her sister's voice. She had shown it to the police, but they brushed it off, said it was probably emotional. Grief does strange things, they told her. But then Christopher vanished. The same day Sarah died, his car was found wrapped around a guardrail 60 miles away. Single vehicle crash, another tragic accident. No drugs or alcohol, just a malfunction, they said. Brake failure. He'd been airlifted to St. Augustine, placed in a medically induced coma. And then, for 11 months, nothing. Not a word, not a movement, until last night. And now Hannah could no longer pretend any of it was random. Not the voicemail, not the timing, not the way Sarah had sounded like she was running out of time. She had tried to let it go. After Sarah's funeral, the apartment they had shared was too full of ghosts. Hannah quit her job at the downtown clinic, packed everything into boxes she couldn't bring herself to open, and moved to Charleston for a fresh start. She told her friends she needed a change. But the truth was, she was running towards something, or maybe away from something that had already caught up to her. On her first day at St. Augustine, she walked into ICU orientation, and there it was, room 414. Langston Christopher, admitted November 2nd, comatose, stable, no known family. Hannah's hands trembled when she read the chart. She didn't tell anyone what she knew. She didn't say she recognized the name, that she remembered the way Sarah's face lit up when she talked about him, or the way Sarah had looked that last week, anxious, distracted, like she was trying to protect something without saying too much. She just requested his case. She said she preferred long-term care, said she was good with quiet patients. And for the next 11 months, she sat beside him, read to him, spoke softly about things she never shared with anyone else. Memories of Sarah's garden, her favorite songs, the way she laughed when it rained. She never said Sarah's name. She never told him who she was. But somehow, deep inside the stillness of that hospital room, grief had begun to shift. And now, after one broken moment of recognition and confusion, after one name spoken like a lifeline, Hannah realized something she hadn't let herself believe until now. Sarah hadn't been paranoid. She had been scared, and she had tried to warn them. Whatever happened that November didn't end with her death, and Christopher Langston, now awake, was the only person who might finally understand why. 2 days passed before Hannah could bring herself to walk back into room 414. The guilt wasn't from leaving, it was from needing to leave, from sitting in her car for nearly an hour afterward, shaking, wondering if she'd made a mistake, wondering if she was in over her head. But deep down, she knew what she was really afraid of wasn't Christopher's confusion. It was his memory. Now, standing at the threshold of the room again, Hannah hesitated. The overhead light cast a soft glow over the room, bathing everything in a quiet kind of stillness. Christopher was awake, propped against 2 pillows, an untouched cup of water on the bedside tray. His once sharp jawline was leaner now, more fragile, and his face carried the imprint of lost time. But his eyes, they were no longer lost. They followed her the moment she stepped in, wide and aware. "You came back," he said. Hannah nodded, her voice tight. "Of course I did." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I owe you an apology for what happened. That first night." He paused, shame creeping into his voice. "I didn't mean to scare you. I saw her. I thought you were—" "Sarah," Hannah said softly, finishing the sentence he couldn't. Christopher looked down at his hands. "It wasn't just your face. It was everything. The voice. The way you looked at me. For a second I thought—" "I understand," she said, taking the chair beside his bed. "You'd just come out of a coma. Nothing was clear, but I think we need to talk." He met her gaze, cautious, curious. "My name is Hannah Blake," she said slowly, carefully. "Sarah was my older sister." Silence. Christopher blinked once. She never mentioned a sister. "She kept a lot to herself," Hannah replied. "We were close growing up. Then life happened. She moved to Atlanta, I stayed in Asheville, but we always found our way back." He exhaled, a shaky breath filled with the kind of grief that sits just beneath the ribs. "She was everything," he said. "The last time I saw her, she seemed scared, but she wouldn't tell me what was going on." Hannah nodded. "I think she was trying to protect you." Christopher looked at her, something changing behind his eyes. "So you knew who I was when I got here?" "Yes," Hannah said. "I transferred to St. Augustine 4 months after her funeral. When I saw your name on the intake board, I couldn't believe it. I didn't plan any of this. I felt like I needed to be close, like maybe I could understand what really happened." "And that message," he whispered. "I remember now. She tried to tell me something about my company. She said someone was watching her." "I got a voicemail too," Hannah said. "A few days before the crash. She said if anything happened to her, I needed to find you, that you deserved the truth." Christopher's expression darkened. "She tried to show me documents once. She said something didn't add up. Financial reports, executive decisions I'd never signed off on. I dismissed it. Told her we'd talk Monday." Hannah's throat tightened. "She didn't make it to Monday." He stared ahead for a long moment, his voice nearly a whisper. "I crashed the day after her funeral. The brakes failed. I remember the sound, a click, then nothing. But they said it was the rain." "They always say it's the weather," Hannah murmured. "It's easier that way." Christopher slowly looked over at her. "So why now? Why come back?" Hannah hesitated, then reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a small, worn leather notebook. She laid it on his lap. "She gave this to me," she said quietly, 2 weeks before the accident. I didn't open it until recently. I couldn't." Christopher ran his fingers over the familiar handwriting on the cover. S.B. His breath caught in his throat. "I think she left you a trail," Hannah said. "And I think she knew someone would try to bury it." He looked at her, and for the first time, not as a ghost of someone he'd lost, but as someone real, someone here. "I don't know what we'll find," he said carefully, "but if she left something behind, we need to follow it." "We will," Hannah said, her voice steady now. They sat in silence for a while, not needing to fill it. The hum of machines in the background had become almost a heartbeat between them. "I thought I lost her," Christopher said finally. "And I almost did. But maybe, just maybe, she left us a way to finish what she started." Hannah nodded, her fingers resting over his on the notebook. "Then let's start where she left off." And in that moment, two people broken by the same loss found something quietly unshakable: purpose. The notebook was a roadmap, fragmented, cryptic, but undeniably intentional. Christopher flipped through it slowly, his fingers trembling as each page revealed more of what Sarah had tried to uncover. The entries began light, with notes about meetings, staff changes, and odd discrepancies in quarterly reports. But as the pages turned, the handwriting grew faster, sharper, more anxious. Red ink circled names. Margin notes whispered suspicions. Hannah sat beside him, watching his eyes scan each page like a man searching for his own shadow. "She was scared," she whispered, "but she didn't run." "No," Christopher said hoarsely. "She fought." One page stood out. Bold capital letters scrawled across the top. "If anything happens to me, it's because of this." Below was a list of file names. Some had check marks beside them. One was underlined twice: Project Echo Ledger, Q3 Internal. Next to it, Sarah had scribbled, "Martin doesn't know I saw it. Shaw's helping him. Chris needs to see this before it's too late." Christopher sat back, his breath shallow. "Martin Rhodes," he said, "my COO. We built the company together. He's been running it while I've been here." "Gregory Shaw?" Hannah asked. "Vice President of Finance. Loyal to Martin." Sarah never trusted either of them. "I told her she was being overprotective, that she was just seeing ghosts." "You weren't the only one who thought she was overreacting," Hannah said quietly. Christopher looked at her. "You believed her, didn't you?" "I wanted to," she admitted, "but I didn't have proof. And when I lost her, I just shut down." Now the proof was in their hands, or at least the start of it. Later that afternoon, Hannah returned to the hospital with a small lockbox she had kept hidden in her closet since Sarah's funeral. Inside were 2 flash drives and a yellow envelope with Sarah's handwriting on the front. "For Chris. Only if you trust them." Hannah hesitated before handing it over. "I didn't read the letter," she said. "I couldn't. It felt too final." Christopher nodded and placed it gently on the side table. Then he reached for the first drive. Hannah pulled out her laptop and connected it. A folder appeared instantly. Echo Evidence _10.29. Inside were spreadsheets, emails, and a surveillance video dated just 4 days before Sarah died. The video was grainy, but clear enough. A dimly lit parking garage, a man in a charcoal suit, Gregory Shaw, standing beside a black SUV. Another man approached. An envelope changed hands. Shaw looked around nervously. Christopher leaned forward. "That's my company's garage. That's Shaw." The feed ended abruptly. Hannah clicked another video, this one recorded from inside a car. The dashboard showed it was Sarah's. Voices. "You need to stop asking questions," a man's voice snapped. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns Chris," Sarah's voice shot back. "You're stealing from his company. He deserves to know." "You think he'll believe you?" the man hissed. "By the time he sees anything, it'll be too late." The video cut out. Silence fell between them, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Christopher's jaw tightened. She knew. She confronted them. "And now we have proof," Hannah said. "But what do we do with it?" "I need help," Christopher said. "Someone who doesn't answer to Martin. Someone who still believes in what I built." He reached for the hospital phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Daniel, it's Chris." The pause on the other end was long. "Jesus, you're alive." "Barely, but I need you." Daniel Reeves, Christopher's former attorney, arrived the next day. Gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and visibly shaken. After reviewing the contents of the flash drive and the notebook, he sat in stunned silence. "This isn't corporate fraud," he said slowly. "This is conspiracy. If this gets out..." "We don't leak it," Christopher said. "We build a case. We do this right. And we do it for Sarah." Daniel nodded. "It won't be easy. Martin has resources, connections, and legal insulation. But he doesn't have this, Hannah said, tapping the laptop. Daniel looked at her, then back to Christopher. Are you both ready for what comes next? Christopher closed his eyes, then opened them with quiet fire. I wasn't ready the first time. That's why she died alone. I won't make the same mistake again. The storm broke quietly, as most reckonings do, not with fury, but with precision. It began with a headline that morning on the Charleston Times. Whistleblower's death tied to corruption inside Langston Tech, sources say. By noon, it had spread like wildfire. National news outlets picked it up. Social media churned with outrage and speculation. Christopher Langston, long presumed a recluse after his coma, was alive, speaking, and pointing fingers. And he had receipts. Daniel Reeves had spent 2 sleepless nights organizing the evidence into a legal packet, complete with authenticated financial reports, timestamps, security footage, and Sarah's handwritten notes. When he submitted the files to federal authorities, he also sent copies to 3 trusted journalists, just in case. Now the world was watching. Christopher sat in a conference room on the 12th floor of the rehab wing, wearing a navy blue blazer that hung a little looser on his frame than it used to. He looked older, not just from the coma, but from grief, from guilt, from waking up to find the life he built corrupted, and the woman he loved gone. Across from him sat Hannah, holding a copy of Sarah's notebook. She'd barely left his side all week. They spoke less now. There were fewer words left to say, only actions to take. You ready for this? She asked softly. Christopher ran his fingers across the front of the press packet. I've been ready since the day I woke up. At precisely 2 p.m., the doors to the Grand Harbor Conference Center opened, revealing a media frenzy. The same venue where Christopher had once unveiled cutting-edge tech now bore a different weight. Truth. He stepped to the podium, a cane in one hand, papers in the other. Cameras clicked. Reporters fell silent. My name is Christopher Langston, he began, voice steady, and I stand before you today not only as the founder of Langston Tech, but as a man who nearly died because he trusted the wrong people. A ripple passed through the crowd. 1 year ago, my fiancée Sarah Blake died in what was reported as a tragic car accident. A week later, I was in a crash of my own that left me in a coma. While I lay unconscious, decisions were made by my COO, Martin Rhodes, and others I once called friends. Decisions that buried the truth. Christopher paused, eyes flicking to the rows of cameras. Sarah was not just a casualty, she was silenced. Gasps broke out. She discovered evidence of financial manipulation within my company. Off-the-record meetings, diverted funds, and shell corporations created by my own leadership team. She tried to warn me. I didn't listen. And now, she's gone. He turned slightly, eyes scanning the audience, until they found Hannah, standing near the back wall. Her hands were clasped, her eyes glistening. I wouldn't be here without someone who refused to give up, he continued. Someone who sat with me when no one else believed I'd ever wake up. Someone who carried my story, and Sarah's, when I couldn't. To Hannah Blake, I owe more than my life. I owe this moment. The applause began, soft but building, for justice, for truth, for Sarah. Later that evening, news broke of Martin Rhodes' arrest, charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and financial fraud. Gregory Shaw was detained by federal agents. Additional executives were placed on administrative leave. Langston Tech's board issued a statement of restructuring, and an independent investigation was launched. But none of that mattered more to Christopher than what happened on the rooftop that night. He and Hannah stood side by side under the stars, the city lights of Charleston blinking below them. The air smelled like salt and new beginnings. You meant every word, she asked. Christopher looked at her, eyes soft. I meant every breath. I still think about her, Hannah admitted, all the time. Me too. And sometimes I wonder, she said slowly, if we're allowed to feel anything good after all this. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I used to think healing meant forgetting, but I've learned it just means caring better. Hannah looked down, tears forming. I didn't want you to be alone, she whispered. You didn't let me be, he said. You brought me back. They stood like that for a while, No cameras, no crowd. Just two people who had walked through fire and emerged not unburned but unbroken. Justice had been served, but more than that, something deeper had been found. The courage to keep living, not just for Sarah, but for themselves. The cemetery was quiet that morning. Christopher and Hannah stood side by side, hands clasped gently, the breeze tugging at the hems of their coats. Autumn had crept into Charleston without warning, softening the trees to gold and red and casting long shadows across the grass. Just a few yards in front of them stood a modest headstone carved from white granite. Sarah Blake, beloved sister, daughter, and dreamer. Her voice became our compass. Beneath it, nestled against the base, lay a hardcover book, freshly printed, its silver lettering gleaming beneath the morning light. The Girl Who Knew the Truth. Hannah crouched to adjust the ribbon tied around it, brushing away a few fallen leaves. She would have hated the title, she said, voice soft, lips curling into a smile. Said it was too dramatic. Christopher chuckled, and then secretly loved it. They stood there for a while, no words needed. The quiet wasn't hollow now, it was sacred. Around them, the world moved on. Bird song filtered through the branches, cars passed on the distant road, and somewhere down the hill, a groundskeeper's mower hummed in the distance. But here, in this quiet pocket of earth, time paused. I think she knew, Christopher said finally, his voice low, that you'd be the one to finish what she started. Hannah's gaze never left the grave. She left breadcrumbs. I just followed them. No, he said. You fought, even when no one else did. You brought light into places I'd buried. Hannah reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a photograph, worn at the edges, folded once down the middle. It showed the three of them, laughing on a sunny afternoon. Sarah in the middle, arms around her little sister and the man she loved. All joy, all unknowing. She placed it next to the book. I wish she could see us now, she whispered. Christopher glanced sideways at her. She does. They stood in silence again, until he spoke, this time more hesitantly. Hannah, I don't know if what we have is the beginning of something new or the continuation of something we never finished. She turned to him slowly, her eyes searching his. But I know this, he said. I don't want to lose you again. Not in this life, not in any. Hannah blinked, tears welling but not falling. She reached up, cupping his cheek with trembling fingers. Then don't, she whispered, because this time, I'm not going anywhere. His eyes shimmered, then closed as he leaned into her touch. And then they embraced. Not as two people clinging to grief, but as two souls honoring it, holding each other in the space between sorrow and something new. They left the cemetery slowly, walking the stone path hand in hand. As they reached the edge of the grounds, Hannah looked back one last time. Goodbye, Sarah, she said. Thank you for everything. The sun broke through the clouds just then, casting golden light across the grass. Weeks passed, headlines faded, investigations continued. The world, as it always does, moved on, but Sarah's name stayed. Christopher donated his share of Langston Tech's profits to fund a nonprofit for whistleblower protections, one that bore her name. He moved into a smaller home near the waterfront, where life was slower and healing came easier. Hannah took a part-time job at the local clinic and spent the rest of her time writing. Together, they began working on a second book, this one less about loss and more about love, survival, and what it meant to begin again. One quiet evening, Christopher handed her a page with a title scrawled at the top. Between the wreckage, Hannah smiled. Too dramatic, he shrugged. She would have loved it. And in the glow of a small living room, where stories were still being told, two people who had walked through fire began together to rebuild, not to replace the past, but to honor it, word by word, step by step. And somehow in the spaces between pain, love found its way home. Life has a way of shaking us when we least expect it. Sometimes it's a phone call in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's the silence that follows, the kind that lingers longer than anyone tells you it will. The story of Hannah and Christopher reminds us that grief doesn't always end with a funeral, and healing doesn't begin with forgetting. True healing often comes in quiet moments, in the act of sitting beside someone, listening, choosing to stay. And sometimes the path forward is built not in grand gestures, but in following breadcrumbs left behind by those we've lost. One of the most powerful lessons from their journey is that love doesn't always arrive when or how we expect it. It can come after loss. It can rise from pain. And it doesn't dishonor the past to embrace what's in front of us now. As Christopher said, healing isn't forgetting. It's learning to carry better. This story also speaks to the courage it takes to seek truth, especially when that truth threatens comfort, power, or legacy. Sarah didn't die because she was reckless. She died because she was brave. And in honoring her, Hannah and Christopher remind us that standing up for what's right sometimes means standing alone, until someone joins you. But perhaps the most enduring message is this: our lives matter not just for what we accomplish, but for what we leave behind in the hearts of others. A voice, a notebook, a single whispered warning can ripple forward and save someone else. If you're carrying grief, let this be a reminder. It doesn't have to be a wall. It can be a bridge. And if someone you love left too soon, maybe their story isn't over. Maybe you're part of how it continues. Stay kind, stay open, and never underestimate what a quiet act of love can begin.